Right. Okay. So, Rory, thank you for giving us your time today. Could you start off by telling us about yourself? So, who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? And how long have you been doing it?
Yeah, so my name's Rory, Rory Hall. I am originally from Bedford. Uh, Spent most of my sort of school life in and around Bedford, and then got up and moved away pretty quickly. And I have said I've probably only done two major roles in my life. I've been in the military, and I now run expeditions overseas. Those are my sort of core activities of what I've done. And I now live in Melbourne, very luckily, for the past 7 years. I've lived in Asia for quite a few years, in Malaysia, in Borneo, and now, lucky enough, in Melbourne. So, ticking along quite nicely, getting a bit old, 56 in a couple of weeks' time. But all in all, I think I've been quite lucky. I've had quite an interesting life. So, doing all right, I believe.
I would agree. And happy birthday for 2 weeks' time. What jobs did your parents do? And when you were young, so when you were a young child, what did you really want to be? What was really exciting to you when you were a kid?
Look, I think my parents didn't do anything particularly interesting. My mum was a secretary. I was a typical door latch kid, got home, there was nobody there, pulling together enough money to pay for the school. And my dad worked nearly his whole life doing insurance for a large hotel chain. So, not knocking my dad, but deeply uninspiring to me anyway. Not something that I really wanted to do. I saw him disappearing early in the morning and coming home late at night, commuting to London for an hour and a half each way from Bedford. So I didn't really feel inspired by that. I'd say at school I was a pretty grey kid, pretty monosyllabic teenager, a little bit of a punk. Didn't really engage too much at school. Had good fun, some good mates, but I wasn't really that inspired by school until I joined the school. I was lucky enough, had the cadet force, and I would say that being in the cadets at school helped open up my mind to being in the outdoors, getting out and about, and actually thinking about a military career. So that was probably how I got on the track of how I've ended up. I've never been particularly career focused. I've always followed my heart. If something sounded fun or interesting, I would generally follow it. I look at some of my old school friends who are perhaps more dedicated and seem to be doing very well, high ends of their careers, whereas I feel like I've meandered around a little bit, but actually I feel like I've had quite a full life to date. So, yeah, I was lucky. The cadets helped me get onto that trail of joining the military.
And when you were in the cadets, were you in a particular branch of the cadets? Was it the army?
Yeah, I actually now you talk about it, I can remember watching, there was something on TV called Fighter Pilot when we were kids. And I looked at that and thought, oh, yeah, I fancy being a fighter pilot, probably along with loads of other kids. And that made me join the RAF cadets at school. But I didn't like it. They had itchy trousers, so I didn't really want to do it. I didn't really like the blue. Got a chance to fly in an aeroplane in a Chipmunk. That was the first time I ever went in an aeroplane, was in a Chipmunk, aged whatever it was, 15 or something. So then we had the chance, the Royal Marine Cadets started at our school, and I thought, oh, that sounds good. And so I joined the Royal Marine Cadets for a couple of years. Quite like the comfy green uniform. It was quite nice. And that was kind of it. And off I went.
There's nothing worse than itchy trousers. I think we will agree on that.
I will say that my first few years in the army, because I ended up joining the army, they had these old itchy shirts, which were an absolute nightmare. Anyway, that's a different story. Not for this. That's over a beer or something.
So did you go straight from school into the army?
I was pretty... I probably could have gone to Polytechnic in those days, uni, as it's now called. I did actually apply for a couple of unis or polys at that time. Actually, to be an accountant or something. Really no idea what I was doing.
Can't see it.
Yeah, thankfully I didn't. But I was pretty determined in those days to not have to rely on my parents. I wanted to be up and independent. I saw going to university as being, an extension of being at school and having to rely on parents and money for another few years. So, yeah, I joined up. I actually tried to be an officer. So I went for a couple of interviews whilst I was still at school, but I was pretty meek, pretty shy, pretty useless, to be honest. Turned up for those officer interviews, and I don't think I impressed them because they didn't want me. So I ended up joining the army as a soldier at the lower end of the spectrum. And because I just rocked up to I think I went to a recruitment office or something in those days. That was before the internet. And they sort of did a quick check of my background, and I did an aptitude test, and they're like, "Oh, you're quite intelligent for joining the army as a sort of basic recruit." So they said, "Oh, why don't you become a aircraft technician fixing helicopters?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, that sounds interesting." So off I went, joined the army. I can remember my mum and dad dropping me at, I think, Waterloo Station, aged 18, off to join the army. Arrived at Reading train station with loads of other nervous-looking young men. Got in the back of a big four-ton army truck, and off I went to basic training. Hair shaved off, and off I went. So I was a pretty young and immature, pretty meek 18-year-old, but that was the start of it. And then 13 years, ended up doing 13 years. So, yeah, good times.
Wow. What did you join?
Got promoted. Oh, sorry, Frank, after you.
Sorry, what did you join? What was it?
I joined the REME, so the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, as an avionics technician. So I did, I think it was a 10-week or 3-month basic training where they run you ragged and you learn to be a basic soldier. And then I spent 2 years training to become an avionics technician, basically fixing helicopters, which was pretty dull at times, but army life was quite good fun. We went out, we had a few beers. There was always a bit of sport, a bit of fitness. Nothing was too serious. A bit of mucking around in the woods, pretending to be soldiers. Well, we were soldiers. And then my first posting, I ended up in Northern Ireland, which was an operational theatre because they had helicopters flying 24 hours around the place. So I did 2.5 years in RAF Aldergrove, which was and still is the main airport outside Belfast. And we worked pretty hard. We were on 24 hours on, 24 off, doing shift work, keeping the helicopters in the air. Did quite a bit of flying around, down onto the border and around. But yeah, good times. I then got the opportunity to get commissioned and become an officer. I had matured by that stage and had a little bit more about me than that meek 18-year-old. And I got the chance to commission into become a commissioned officer. Did a couple of courses along the way, ended up in Scotland with the Scottish Infantry. I have no idea how I ended up there. And then I went to Sandhurst and did a year at Sandhurst to become a commissioned officer. And at that point, I then joined the Royal Artillery, became an artillery officer, which I did for eight or so years, I think it was.
Gosh.
And did you move on to, was it Shrivenham that you were at as well?
No, I kind of left the army before Shrivenham, so I was doing quite well in the military. I ended up I did a couple of, stayed in a couple of units, one in Salisbury, another one in Germany for 3 years. Got promoted up through, became an adjutant of a regiment, which is quite a senior position. And we actually ended up going to Kosovo, my regiment. So I was adjutant whilst we were in Kosovo. But at that point, I kind of saw just desk jobs coming. You'd kind of done all the fun stuff, running around with your soldiers and other stuff, and I saw desk jobs looming in the near future. So I made the decision to leave. I had a few factors in that. There was a girlfriend influeing me, being led by my heart as opposed to my brain. And also I got a letter from an old mate who was an army mate, and he said, "Mate, I've just set up an expedition company. Come and join us. Come and be part of that." I was like, "Oh, that sounds fun." So I gave up what would have been probably quite a good and long army career to go and pursue running expeditions. Again, leading with my heart sounded more interesting.
Fascinating. One thing we were going to ask you, I mean, you mentioned Kosovo, and obviously appreciate that there's some sort of sensitivities around that. But could you tell us about one of your more challenging postings? So what was it that in the army that you felt was a difficult time?
Look, firstly, I'd couch these comments with the fact that I actually was in the military, in the army, when things weren't quite as rough and unpleasant as they have been over the past few years with Afghanistan and Iraq. So I was never exposed to that. And I know a lot of young men and women subsequently have gone through that. So I would say I had it relatively easy. And I would say the big thing with the army was actually there's a lot of sitting around and getting a bit bored at times. So I probably spent a couple of years in total of my army life deployed in Bosnia, in Croatia, in Kosovo. And a lot of it was sitting around, living in a container, a shipping container. So it makes me laugh now. I see all these people who are buying these shipping containers to live in little tiny homes. It's like, well, I've been there, done that. I don't think I need to do that again. But there was a lot of boredom, then followed by some extreme moments of action, and then a lot more boredom sitting around. So probably just ticking over, not counting down the days too much, keep myself occupied is probably one of the biggest challenges I found. Being away from loved ones, I could deal with all that. It was just a little bit of boredom, really.
Well, I've met your brother.
Exactly. I was going to say that's one of the reasons why you'd possibly stay away. Look, I think the biggest thing I got out of being in the military, and particularly when I became an officer, was about leadership of your soldiers, of your people, and really how to be a leader. And that taught me a lot, and I think it's made me who I am today. Everybody thinks that if you're in the military, you're very used to being shouted at. You think that as the boss, you are running around shouting at people, kicking people to do stuff. I learned to love my people. I mean, and I mean that in a quite a strong sense of the word. My soldiers, who are all men at that point, the military's changed a lot now, and a lot more women. But my guys, I used to really love them. I'd do anything for my people. And to me, one of the key leadership qualities, and it's actually how I live my life now, is about selflessness. It's about putting other people first. And I think that just rolls into everything. And I think that can make you a courageous leader because you care so much about your people. You will literally do anything for them, whether that's in battle, peacetime, whatever it is. And that still runs really deep with me now. And I find it, I actually probably a bit too much at times. I put other people way more ahead of perhaps my own family and myself than I should. But that's kind of been embedded in me. And I think that's definitely a big part of who I am.
So that's really interesting. So that sort of servant leadership style, was that always in you, or was it the army that uncovered that? Where do you think that emerged from?
I don't know, to be honest. I think I've always been fairly placid and relaxed, but I did find the military kind of brought some stuff out of me. I actually think I was pretty good. I don't tend to like to blow my own trumpet, but I actually think I was quite a good officer and a leader. I think I had quite a lot of respect. So I just got lucky. I kind of found my spot, and the military pressed the buttons. I had some good, role models to follow. I was able to pick and find the bits that work for me. And I think, luckily, I was in a sort of a purple patch, if you like. I was doing well. I enjoyed it, and it kind of worked. Does that answer that? Probably not.
That's brilliant. Can I ask just about Sandhurst? What was it like going there from the ranks? Do you think you were treated any differently to the
it was funny. It was funny because there was obviously quite a bit. There's a lot of toffee-nosed people floating around in Sandhurst.
Yeah.
But they were the same. They're the same, same as me, flesh and blood. At that time, there was quite a few other people from the ranks coming through, so there was a few of us there, and we all mucked in. Once you've been thrashed around for a week up on the moors and you're freezing and having to cuddle each other to keep warm and you're soaking wet, all those barriers are well broken down, and you just the friendships, the camaraderie just builds very quickly after all that. And that's one of the key things I miss about the military, is that sense of camaraderie. Some of those friends that I made, still in contact with today, still, you still know you could turn up and they'd do anything for you. That's part and parcel of the military. But I actually enjoyed Sandhurst. I'd been through, in the military, call them bullshit courses, where they muck you around from morning to noon to midnight, and you're cleaning your rhinals with toothbrushes, all that senseless, inane stuff. I'd done that for quite a lot previously, so you have to take it in your stride, have a bit of a giggle. You get locked up. They'd lock you up for mucking up on the drill parade, and you get beasted around, and you have to have a sense of humour, and that's where that sort of British Army dark sense of humour comes from. You need that to get you through those moments.
So that wide range of experiences, both in the ranks and then as a commissioned officer, clearly shaped you and your post-military career aspirations. What prompted you to join your friend in the expeditions business? Was it just the idea of being able to do more for young people? What was the driver for you?
Look, I suppose the other thing I got out of the military was helping, or just seeing young people, young men as they were, my soldiers, early 20s, often from quite not troubled backgrounds, but most of our soldiers from Doncaster and Sheffield and places like that. They're all ex-mining families, quite a lot of hardship in some of those families, tough. Some of them were bare knuckle. Their old man was a bare knuckle fist fighter in the street, and all just lovely, salt of the earth guys. But they were rough around the edges, and you needed to give them some guidance. But you needed to gain their trust and actually give them opportunities. And I gave some of those tougher young men opportunities to lead and promotion, and they just flourished in front of your eyes. And it was then that I realized that, wow, this is a very empowering, rewarding thing to do, empowering young people to be the best versions of themselves and just get on with it. It's not about me, it's about them really powering forward and becoming awesome people. And I suppose when I left the military, I was mainly intrigued by the fact that, wow, running expeditions, that sounds interesting. I want a bit of action. I left the military because it was looking like desk jobs and all that kind of stuff. So suddenly it was a bit more action, leading, trips up Kilimanjaro and all that kind of stuff. But it soon became apparent, put that to one side, actually, what was probably unconsciously, subconsciously driving me was being there to help young people really develop. And I've just started to get a real kick out of it, seeing young people over a matter of a couple of weeks growing and blossoming into awesome, broad-minded individuals ready to take on the world. And that's what you get. It's almost a continuation of army life, where you get mucked around, and that expedition time, 4 weeks in the jungle, you bond and you change and you come back different, particularly when you're younger, 17 or 18, and it changes people. And I just found that so rewarding, and I still find it really rewarding to this day to sit there and talk to young people and point them in the right direction, or a direction. It's not right or wrong. Any direction. Give them something, you know. So that's where I get my kicks today, and I'm very fortunate. I don't lead trips so much now. I kind of float in. So I am the Asia and Australia director for Camps International. I sit in Australia and I recruit young people and talk to schools and get people to sign up. But I also oversee our Asia operation. So I actually go there 3, 4, 5 times a year and see young people on expedition and just chat with them. It's not like it's kind of like being the queen or the king turning up. I just kind of, hello, wave a little bit. How you doing? But you can have some actually quite good conversations with them, talk a load of rubbish. And
I've always thought of you as a queen, right?
Yeah, probably more of a queen than maybe. So I'm not exposed to them all the time now, but to go in and see young people just getting something out of these trips is extremely rewarding.
Could I just tell us a little bit about the expeditions? Who are the kids coming? Where are they from? And what's a typical kind of expedition entail?
Yeah, so look, it's Camps International. We build a camp in a rural village, either in Asia, Africa, South America. And then we employ local people from that community to work in the camp. Cooks, cleaners, security, project staff, all that kind of stuff. And then we bring schools from UK, Australia, even Dubai into that camp to have a nice, safe, secure area to then go into the community to conduct longer term project work. So we do stuff like water supplies, kindergarten classrooms, English teaching classrooms, drainage, access, all sorts of bits and pieces that the community need and might not otherwise get. I have to be careful. A lot of people, white saviors and all that kind of stuff nowadays. People want to go in and save the world and feel good about themselves. So we're quite careful how we do things. So we normally take UK students will go on a trip normally for 4 weeks, and they'll do a couple of different communities. They'll do some environmental camps, they'll do some reforestation, they'll see some monkeys and some elephants, and then they'll do some trekking, sleep in a hammock in the jungle for a few nights, and have it quite rough. It's quite rough, particularly for a 16-year-old coming from UK who, I'm sorry to say, are not particularly robust or resilient nowadays. I probably wasn't when I was 16, but there we go. So they come to us, get stuck in, being away from home, get them off the devices. That's probably one of the key things. Muck in with the rest of their group, realise that they can have an amazing time without a device, without any distractions, do silly stuff, broaden their horizons, see people who are probably doing it worse than them but actually are a lot happier, and hopefully impact their life and sometimes change the way their life rolls. So, yeah, very rewarding, very lucky. I have an amazing crew of people in Borneo and Cambodia, all locals, 30 or 40 of them, fantastic, lovely people who've worked for me now for 10, 15 years. Again, they're my people. I'd do anything for them. And they know that, and I know they'd do anything for me. Just beautiful, lovely people, and they share their community, their life with every single student that comes. They show them around. They're very proud of their community. We want them to hold on to their language, to their culture. In Borneo, there's 36 different ethnic groups in Sabah, this Malaysian state that we operate. They've all got their own language. It's all disappearing. We're all becoming amorphous Western. We all want to be the same. We all want to drink in Starbucks. We all want the latest iPhone. We all want to, wear the same fashion. And we all watch the same TV. It's important that people hold on to their roots. And actually, I was going to say to you guys, I've been to a couple of Indigenous events where indigenous people come together, hosted in Borneo it was, and they were coming from Nepal and Laos and Borneo and Cambodia and Vietnam, all over. And I was invited as one of the few sort of foreigners, Westerners, and they went round the room saying, "Oh, okay, so which tribe are you from?" And these guys were pinpointing exactly which village they were from and what their language was and how long that culture had been going. And there was me going, "Well, I'm from England, Bedford, yeah,
Biddenham.
you know." And I don't have a cultural dance, and I felt really quite sad and lonely. I felt quite sad and lonely. You know what I'm trying to say. Yeah. It was a bit of an eye opener.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for people to think about that. So that's what we're just trying to get young people to think about, that, to actually embrace their culture. And of course, being in Australia, that's a pretty key part of being an Aussie, is understanding Indigenous Australians. So.
You mentioned Borneo a lot, Rory. You settled there for a while.
Yeah. So my firstborn child was born in Borneo.
So was I.
Yeah, no, I understand you were as well, Andy. Yeah. But you were down the way in Kuching, right? And so Freddie was in.
Yes.
Freddie was in Kota Kinabalu. Look, I was lucky. I worked for Rally International for a while, running expeditions. For a couple of years, and I ended up in Borneo for 3 years running their expeditions there for them. So I lived there. Look, it's got its challenges. You learn a bit of patience. Us Westerners are a little bit edgy. We're not particularly patient when it comes to people not turning up on time and things like that. We expect everything to, right, 5 minutes past the hour. Why aren't they here? Come on. So you learn a bit more patience. And I never really wanted to marry an English lady. I'm very sorry, English ladies listening to this podcast.
So many broken hearts.
Yeah, I wanted to marry a foreign. I just thought it would be a bit more interesting. So I have. But I love, the mix of culture, being in Asia. I'm lucky. I live in Australia and I get to go in and out of Asia every few months. I mean, I'm lucky. And Borneo is a great place, but it's got some problems. That the oil palm plantations taking over the whole of the area. The jungle is receding in Sabah. There's about 3 or 4 jungle reserves which are getting squeezed on all sides. And the knock-on effect with the biodiversity. It's disappearing very quickly. It's not going to be around for much longer. But our groups we had a group in Borneo a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week, had elephants coming through their camps. We had to move them out of the camp
wow.
and into a more secure area. So you definitely don't want to herd elephants coming through your jungle hammock camp in the middle of the night. It's not good for safety. Risk assessments, not good. So
it kills your insurance.
Not good for public liability. Yeah.
Talking of rare animals and birds, and knowing that you are, so attuned to nature, tell us a couple of stories about the flora and fauna that you've been exposed to.
Look, I'd probably say the big thing in Borneo and possibly even in Cambodia, but Borneo particularly in the jungle, is the bugs. And it's not everyone's cup of tea, the bugs and the leeches. So you go trekking in the jungle. It's actually the same in Australia. But if you go trekking and it's a little bit wet, the leeches will come out. And I don't think many English, European people have been exposed to leeches too much. But they move very quickly. As you brush through the undergrowth, they'll get on you. And they are very good at getting inside your trousers, inside your boots, inside your socks, underneath your foot. And you'll just be walking along and you feel a little bit of a tickle on the bottom of your foot. It's like, oh, what's that? And then you'll take your boot off and take your sock off, and there'll be a big fat leech attached to the sole of your foot, and blood everywhere. And if you know leeches, once you've taken them off, And it was like, oh, how do you take them off? Well, you just yank the bloody thing off. Don't muck around. Just get the thing off and flick it away. Oh, should you use salt? No, just take it off and get rid of it. But of course, they use anticoagulant in their mouth, so your wound will continue to bleed for quite some time. So there's always a lot of blood with leeches, so it looks a lot worse than it is. I've had leeches in the mouth, leeches trying to get on your eyeballs, leeches in your ears.
You personally have had a leech in your mouth?
Yeah.
Oh my God!
But that does remind me of a tick story from the army where we spent some time in the Scottish Hebrides on Jura, beautiful, lovely Scottish island, beautiful whiskey, but the midges and the ticks,
Yeah.
Oh my God. So that's where you know your best mates are the ones that are willing to help you remove ticks from your nether regions, the ones that you can't see. Those are your good lifelong buddies. I've got a few of those.
I was just on that. I went to, my dad did a lot of subtropical stuff, and I used to go and join him in some holidays. And we're in Belize, and one evening he called me into his room. He said, "Listen, I need your help." And I said, "What is it?" He goes, "Well, got a few ticks, and they're on my arse." So I spent an evening with a pair of tweezers on my dad's arse, pulling ticks.
That's what you call bonding. Yeah. No, it's good.
So, moving swiftly away from ticks on the arse.
Yeah.
You've got kids coming from the UK, Australia, and other countries.
Dubai, mainly. Yeah.
Can you see what would a group? How would a group differ from those
That's
three?
That's a good question. I don't want to upset people with my response. However, I'll keep it generic. So some of the students that come perhaps from international schools that perhaps go on lots of trips and potentially live in a slightly false environment. I'm talking specifically about Middle East particularly. Some of those students are amazing, but quite a big chunk of them are a little bit difficult. And actually, I do think they are probably the ones that could get the most out of our trips by coming and becoming a bit more grounded. I would say UK kids in general are not quite as robust and resilient as perhaps they could be. They are dreadful at remaining hydrated. I mean, it's 33 degrees and very humid. So they do drop like flies in the heat. They do come with a lot of issues. Are
the kids from what sort of backgrounds are the kids
from?
Are they from
they come from all sorts of schools. All sorts of schools.
Right.
Actually, most of the schools that come with us from UK are your bog standard government, state school. So they're a real mix, and they've had to work hard over 18 months, 2 years to raise the money, £4,000 to come on this trip. So it's a pretty big chunk of cash. It's a big commitment. So I always, when I see them, say, well done, guys. Brilliant. You got here. You made the commitment. So good on you. They are carrying quite a lot of mental health issues now. So I've seen that increase over the past 5 years, particularly post-COVID. Young people really battling a lot of mental health, and maybe because it's out there more and people are more aware of it. So it's more talked about. Yeah. So I think that's probably a good thing. But there's definitely a lot of young people that just sometimes lack a little bit of love, sometimes lack a bit of attention from families, and just lack a little bit of self-belief. And that's what we hope they come away on the trip and can actually go, you know what, I got through that. Geez, it was hard. I'm not sure I want to sleep in a hammock again, but wow, I'm really proud of what I've achieved. And often it can be a stepping stone to, onwards and upwards for the rest of their life. I would say Aussie kids are definitely a bit tougher. Now, I would say that sitting in Melbourne, but they're used to the heat. They know they got to drink water. They know to stay out of the sun. UK kids, as soon as that they get to the sunshine, they're trying to get tanned. Aussie kids know that's not safe, and generally they're a bit tougher.
Yeah.
Don't know why that is.
I guess
That's the way it is.
Aussie kids are out in the outdoors more than British kids, I guess.
Not all of them. Not all of them.
No.
We still see a lot of mental health issues with Aussie kids, pretty much the same as UK kids, particularly if they're in a city kids. But your country kids, farmers, they're pretty tough. Yeah, they're pretty tough kids. Yeah,
I always thought that would be perhaps something worth a try for kids, inner city kids with problems. Just go and work on a sheep farm for a summer or something, and then you might have snapped out of your depression.
Look, I do think young people, I think they're brave to go and sign up for these things, to raise the money and go and do it. So all credit to them. I can't sit here and criticize, and I really wish I could help all of them to realize how amazing they can be, what great individuals they are, and they have some amazing ideas, and they do tough it out. I've seen young people trekking, small young girls trekking with a rucksack almost half their body weight, crying for 3 or 4 days during these treks incessantly, unconsolable, but they get through it. I mean, that's serious resilience to get through that kind of stuff. So there's some seriously impressive young people out there.
Yeah. Did you do anything like that as a kid? Did you do like Outward Bound course or anything like that in your holidays?
Only what I did in the cadets at school.
Yeah.
I did when I before I joined the army, the one thing my mum forced me to do, I went to be a counsellor on Camp America. So that's where you go to America, to these kind of rich kid camps I was in upstate New York. I was in charge of 8 12, 13-year-old boys living in this log cabin in the woods and teaching archery. I mean, geez, I didn't know what I was doing, but that was kind of my trip. That was an eye opener for sure. And I'm glad my mum pushed me to do it. I didn't really want to do it.
Yeah.
I was a bit lazy.
So, if someone listening to this, the 2 or 3 people who will, what if they wanted their kids or kids? I'm just thinking of my partner teaches at a secondary school in London.
Yeah.
What's the name of the company, and how could they start thinking about saving up to come on do a trip?
Look, so name of the company is Camps International, but there are lots of other companies out there that kind of do this. So a quick Google search will find it. We normally make the connection with the school. So we approach the school first, make a connection with the teacher to then kind of get agreement from the school. We then come in and present to students and parents and that kind of thing. So that's kind of normally how we do it. So that's really aimed at school groups. Once you've left school, I do think gap years are quite a good idea, just to see. We see a lot of young people come out of school. They've got some great qualifications, but they're a little bit narrow-minded. All they've known is school. So I think to get out in the big wide world and do a gap year, some traveling is worth doing. Have a bit of fun, let off some steam, but also try and have a bit of purpose. Don't just go mental. There's a lot of people go and do the Asia Trail up through Thailand and all that kind of stuff, which is, it's good to let off steam, but I think you need to try and focus in a little bit and give a little bit back somehow. Not sure how, but I think doing some investigation is definitely worth doing.
What do you do then when you're not working? I imagine you're a very outdoorsy type of guy. You're going away at weekends, or you've got kids now?
I've got kids. So, and I love being in Australia. I think it's amazing, the outdoor life, being able to jump in the truck and go camping up the way, driving off road, walking through the bush. I just love it. And you could spend a lifetime in Australia and not see everything. So I do feel very fortunate to be here. My main thing, and what got me through COVID, because being in Melbourne, we probably had one of the most severe lockdowns during COVID, and it was pretty rough. We were only allowed out 5K, so I snuck out a little bit further, and we only allowed out for an hour a day. But I go cycling and mountain biking now. That is my thing. So I get up before sunrise. I'm lucky I've got a big mountain bike park. Oh, it's a park, but it's got mountain bike trails, and I go mountain biking up there at sunrise for an hour and a half.
Wow.
There's nobody in there except the kangaroos, mate. The roos jumping out of the bushes, which can scare you a bit because some of them are pretty big, and you can get pretty close to them, almost touch them. And in the sort of dawn light, and your eyes not quite adjusted, a bloody great big thing jumps out of the bush in front of you. And of course, being a Brit and living in Australia, we're always slightly twitchy about that stuff that's going to kill you, like snakes. So always a little bit paranoid about snakes.
Have you ever come across one?
Over one? Yeah, they're basking on the trail when you're mountain biking. You need to. And when you're going at dawn, and every tree root looks like a snake, gets the old heart going a bit. But so mountain biking, being in the fresh air, that's I think that's good for everyone's mental health. Just get out, walk around a bit, get out in the wild.
Well, look, Rory, I think I'll let you go and get back to your lovely life in Melbourne. Thank you ever so much for talking to us. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Mate, absolute pleasure. Good to see you.
Take care.
See ya.